The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky painted in shades of amber and deep blue. Jamal walked down the cracked sidewalk, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his shoes kicking up dust as he made his way through the quiet streets. It was a long day at the car wash. His arms ached and his fingers were pruned from hours in soapy water. But he didn't mind. At 16, Jamal had learned that complaining didn't change anything. His mother worked double shifts at the diner and the bills never seemed to stop coming. Every dollar he earned mattered. The neighborhood was poor but alive. Music drifted from open windows. Kids played basketball in the alley, and the air carried the scent of fried chicken from Mrs. Green's food stand. Jamal's stomach growled, but he kept walking. He needed to save for school supplies. His dream was simple yet impossible for most around him. He wanted to become a mechanic, to fix cars instead of just washing them. He often imagined having his own garage one day, a small sign with his name on it, Jamal's Auto Works. As he crossed the intersection, a distant roar echoed through the street. It was the sound of a car engine revving too hard, tires screeching against asphalt. Jamal turned instinctively. And then it happened. A blinding flash of headlights, the screech of twisting metal, and an explosion of sound as a car crashed, full force into a light pole on the corner. The impact shook the ground beneath his feet. Sparks flew, glass shattered, and smoke poured out like a dark storm. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The car was already on fire. Flames crawled up the hood, spreading faster than Jamal had ever seen. He could faintly make out a man slumped behind the steering wheel. People started to gather, drawn by the noise. Some pulled out their phones to record. Others stood frozen, murmuring in panic. But no one moved forward. The heat was intense. The fire too close. The danger too real. Jamal felt his chest tighten. He could walk away, pretend he didn't see it, like everyone else. But something inside him refused. Maybe it was his father's, old voice echoing in his mind. A man's worth is measured by what he does when nobody's watching. He dropped his backpack, kicked off his torn sneakers, and ran toward the flames. The heat was suffocating, the air thick with smoke and gasoline. He coughed but didn't stop. He could hear the crackling fire, smell the burning rubber, and feel the sting of smoke in his eyes. The man inside wasn't moving. Jamal's heart pounded so loud, it drowned out everything else. Without thinking about what might happen to him, he reached the driver's side and pulled at the door handle with all his strength. It didn't budge. He stepped back, coughing hard, sweat and ash mixing on his face. But he wasn't giving up. The flames roared louder as Jamal reached the car, the searing heat pushing against his skin like a living thing trying to drive him back. Thick, black, smoke billowed into the night sky, burning his eyes and filling his lungs until he coughed uncontrollably. The smell of gasoline was sharp and nauseating. Through the broken windshield, he could see the man inside, motionless, his head leaning against the steering wheel. Jamal's pulse raced. He had to move fast. He grabbed the door handle and yanked with all his might, but it wouldn't budge. The metal was bent from the crash, jammed tight against the frame. He pulled again, harder, but the handle snapped off in his hand, cutting his palm. Pain shot through him, but there was no time to think about it. "Come on, man, wake up," he shouted through the cracked glass, pounding on it with his fist. The man didn't stir. Behind him, voices were shouting. Someone yelled for help. Another screamed to stay back, afraid the car might explode. Sirens were still far away. Jamal tore off his shirt, wrapped it around his hand, and began smashing the side window. The first hit did nothing. The second cracked it slightly. He hit it again and again, ignoring the blood dripping from his knuckles. His arms burned, his chest tightened, but he didn't stop. On the fifth strike, the window shattered. Tiny shards rained down, glittering orange in the firelight. He reached through, unlocked the door, and pulled it open. A wave of heat and smoke hit him full in the face, making his eyes water. Inside, the man was breathing, shallow, faint. Jamal grabbed him under the arms and tried to drag him out, but the man's seatbelt held tight. "No, no, no," Jamal muttered, fumbling for the buckle. His hands were trembling, slick with sweat and blood. Finally, the latch clicked, and the belt snapped free. He braced his feet against the car and pulled with everything he had. The man's weight was dead heavy, his suit catching on the metal frame. The flames were spreading fast, licking up the sides, reaching for them both. "Come on," Jamal shouted, dragging him inch by inch. His lungs screamed for air and his vision blurred. Just as he cleared the car door, a small explosion burst from the engine. A deafening boom that sent a wave of fire into the night. Jamal and the man were thrown to the ground. He rolled the man away from the burning wreck, coughing violently as debris rained down around them. The car was fully engulfed now, flames shooting high into the air. The man stirred weakly, coughing, eyes fluttering. "Open. You saved me," he whispered hoarsely, barely audible over the crackling fire. Jamal didn't reply. His chest heaved as he sat there, covered in soot and sweat, watching the flames consume what was left of the car. In the distance, sirens finally drew near, but by then the boy had already saved the man's life. Morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of Jamal's small apartment, casting faint lines across the peeling walls. He barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flames again, felt the sting of smoke in his throat, and heard the explosion echo in his ears. His hands were wrapped in bandages where glass had cut through his skin, and his muscles ached as though he had been in the crash himself. But there was no time to rest. Bills didn't wait, and his mom couldn't afford to miss another shift at the diner. Jamal quietly slipped out, careful not to wake her. The streets were already buzzing with the sound of morning traffic and kids heading to school. He walked, the same route he always did, past the old grocery store with flickering lights, past the graffiti-covered walls, past the same people who nodded to him without knowing that last night he had risked his life to save a stranger. He didn't tell anyone. To him it wasn't something heroic. It was just what needed to be done. At the car wash, the day began like any other. Water sprayed, engines idled, and the scent of soap and oil filled the air. Jamal tied his apron tighter and got to work, moving slower than usual because of his sore hands. His boss, Mr. Red, noticed the bandages. "You all right, kid?" he asked, his voice rough but concerned. Jamal nodded quickly. "Just fell, that's all." Mr. Red grunted and moved on. Jamal didn't want attention. He just wanted to finish his shift and go home. By noon, the sun was high, baking the pavement. Jamal wiped sweat from his forehead and stepped aside to rest when a sleek black Mercedes rolled into the lot. Everyone turned to stare. The car gleamed like liquid glass, definitely not the kind of vehicle that came here often. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in a tailored suit stepped out. Jamal's breath caught. It was him, the man from the burning car. He looked completely different now, his face clean, his posture strong. For a second, Jamal thought he must be imagining it. The man scanned the lot, then his eyes landed on Jamal. A slow smile spread across his face. "There you are," he said, his voice steady but warm. Jamal froze, unsure what to do. The other workers looked on curiously as the man walked toward him. "You saved my life last night," he said simply. "I've been trying to find you." Jamal's boss stepped forward, puzzled. "This kid? What's going on here?" The man extended his hand. "My name's Richard Sterling." His grip was firm, his gaze sincere. Jamal hesitated before shaking. His hand, his heart pounding again. But for a completely different reason this time. He had no idea that the moment he'd pulled that man from the fire was about to change his entire life. Jamal sat stiffly in the back seat of the black Mercedes, his hands folded nervously in his lap. The leather interior smelled expensive, clean, unfamiliar, nothing like the old buses he usually rode. The city outside flashed by in quick, colorful streaks. Glass towers, luxury stores, people in fine clothes moving with purpose. He'd never been to this part of town before. His reflection in the tinted window. A skinny teenager in a faded hoodie, bandaged hands resting on his knees, looked out of place against the backdrop of wealth. Richard glanced back at him from the driver's seat, smiling warmly. "You doing all right back there?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Jamal murmured, though his voice trembled slightly. They soon pulled up to a restaurant that looked like something out of a movie. Tall glass doors, marble floors, a doorman in a crisp suit. When they walked in, heads turned. The chandelier light bounced off Jamal's dark, worn clothes, and for a moment he wanted to sink into the floor. He'd never been anywhere like this. Never seen people eating food that probably cost more than his week's pay. Richard noticed his unease and gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Don't worry about all that," he said softly. "You're my guest today." They were led to a quiet corner table by the window. The waiter placed down menus printed on heavy paper, each dish written in elegant cursive. Jamal stared at it blankly, unable to recognize a single thing. Richard chuckled kindly and ordered for both of them. When the waiter left, he looked at Jamal and said, "You know, when I woke up in the hospital last night, they told me someone had pulled me from the wreck. They said I was lucky. I didn't even know your name until I went back there this morning." Jamal shifted in his seat, feeling shy. "It was nothing, sir. I just did what anyone would do." Richard's eyebrows lifted slightly. "No," he said firmly. "Not anyone would have done that. Most people froze. You ran straight into fire." His voice softened. "Why did you do it?" Jamal hesitated. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I just saw you there, and I couldn't walk away. My dad used to say, if you can help someone, you do it, no matter what." Richard smiled faintly, his expression filled with something that looked like respect. "Your father raised a good man." They talked for almost an hour. Jamal told him about his mom, about the neighborhood, about his dream of becoming a mechanic. Richard listened carefully, not interrupting once. When the bill came, he waved it off without looking. "You've got potential, Jamal," he said as they left. "And I think it's time the world saw it too." Jamal didn't fully understand what he meant, but something in Richard's tone made his heart race. It felt like life had just opened a door he didn't know existed. The days that followed felt like a dream Jamal was afraid to wake up from. Everything started changing so quickly that it didn't feel real. One morning, a shiny car stopped in front of his building again. Richard stepped out, holding an envelope and a wide grin. "You're enrolled," he said, handing it to Jamal. Inside were papers from a local technical institute. Tuition fully paid, with Jamal's name printed, in bold at the top. "You said you wanted to be a mechanic," Richard continued, "so I made a few calls." Jamal's hands trembled as he held the documents. For the first time, the dream that had always seemed impossible was now within reach. News of his bravery had spread like wildfire. Local TV stations ran the story. Teen saves millionaire from fiery crash. Reporters came to his neighborhood asking questions, snapping pictures. Strangers stopped him in the street to shake his hand. "That's the boy from the news," they'd whisper. Jamal didn't know what to say to any of them. He wasn't looking for fame. He had just done what felt right. But his mother, she couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, pride glowed in her tired eyes. Richard didn't stop there. He helped Jamal's mother get a better job at one of his companies and arranged for their apartment to be renovated. When Jamal protested, saying he didn't deserve all this, Richard simply replied, "You gave me my life back, Jamal. The least I can do is help you live yours." Those words stayed with him. Weeks passed and Jamal started attending his mechanic classes. He threw himself into his work, studying engines, learning about machines, his hands steady and confident. Every evening he came home covered in grease but smiling wider than ever. He finally had a purpose, something to build toward. On weekends he volunteered at a local youth center, teaching kids how engines worked, reminding them that no dream was too small if you kept pushing. One evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Jamal stood by his apartment window. The light turned everything golden, the rooftops, the streets, even the worn-out sneakers by the door. His mother was cooking dinner, humming softly in the kitchen, Outside, kids were laughing, chasing each other down the block. For a long moment, Jamal just stood there taking it all in. He thought about that night, the heat, the fire, the fear, and how one act of courage had changed everything. He whispered to himself, "Sometimes the hardest things lead to the best places." He smiled, looking down at his hands. The same hands that once broke a window to save a life now built engines, fixed things, and shaped his own future. The world hadn't just rewarded his bravery. It had reminded him that even from the poorest streets, light could rise from the smoke.